All right, and we are back with session 2. Before we get started, I'd like to introduce our reviewers for this session. First, we have Dan Willig. Dan is the Director of User Experience at From. Did you say From, or is it FROM? From the digital transformation agency based in New York City. Over the course of 10 plus years, Dan's worked on a range of projects from high-profile clients, including Avis and Budget Car Rentals, American Girl, Girl Scouts of America, the Smithsonian Institute, StarTrek.com, Sesame Workshop, Cartoon Network, and the School of Visual Arts. So Dan, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
And we also have Lynn Maharis. Lynn is the Associate Creative Tech Director working in advertising, and some of her clients have included American Express, IBM, the Webby Awards, IKEA, Starbucks, and Jägermeister. Her work has been recognized by Con Leon, Clio Awards, the One Show, and the Webby Awards. She obtained a BA in GIS and Anthropology from the University of Colorado Boulder.
Go Buffs!
And an MFA in Design and Technology from Parsons School for Design. So thank you, Lynn, for being here. Okay, and so we're going to get started right away with Allison. Actually, before I do that, David Shaw is going to be moderating this panel. So David, take it away.
All right. Okay, yeah, so this is session 2. This is interactive screens. And this session goes from 11 to 1. And our first up is Allison Casey.
Hi guys, let me just set up my screen. Cool, so hi, I'm Allison, and my project is Engaging Recovery. So sports, remaining active and staying healthy has always been a really important part of my life. So I was originally going to be on the track team here at CU, but in favor of a team sport, I ended up on the rugby team, which has been a huge part of my college experience. What I've found is that as you get to more competitive levels of sports, the more it is ingrained in you, how important it is to take care of your body and take the proper steps and precautions to keep it healthy, which is especially important in a sport like rugby. With this being the case, one of my teammates came up to me this year and started talking about a post-workout recovery and working on a CBD product to help with recovery. During this process, one of the things that continuously came up was that a lot of gym goers, especially those who are newer to working out, they tend to lack the knowledge or understanding understand the importance of post-workout recovery. With this problem in mind, I decided that for my capstone, I wanted to try and create a tool to help bridge this particular gap of knowledge and create an engaging website with animation and access to further resources to give people an easy way to educate themselves so they can have a more successful experience with working out and other athletic activities. So the majority of ways that people can typically get this information is through fitness classes, personal training, or through websites, with the first two typically being pricey and then the latter often being overwhelming and often not very interesting or engaging. So as a result, I tried to create something that wasn't overwhelming but got the basic information across in an engaging manner through using animation and a visually appealing platform while also providing some further resources for people to explore each thing in more depth. So this is just a quick little kind of screen cap of just a scroll through kind of mobily. So kind of to accomplish what I'd set out to do, I created this website that people can access through QR codes, and ideally they would have done this at the gym. Given our current situation, that hasn't really happened. But that was kind of the overall intention for the interaction. So the site is broken up into sections, which are active recovery, which is about using low intensity exercise after an intensive workout to help muscles recover and keep blood flow up. Rest, which is often not balanced into workout regimens properly, and stretching, which keeps muscles flexible, strong, and then nutrition. And then each of these sections is accompanied by a short but informative section of text and an animated video that covers the content along with this content. And then I've also provided buttons to take users to like some more in-depth resources. So here's kind of how I got here. Everything started from storyboarding and figuring out what content I wanted to incorporate and how the information should be displayed and accessible. What I ended up designing was 4 videos focused on what I just mentioned, the active recovery, rest, stretching, and nutrition. And then this to be displayed on a website using parallax scrolling and further animation. So from there, I moved on to asset creation, like content creation, and just kind of getting everything laid out digitally, and especially just kind of laid out like time frame wise for each animation. And then from there, I got the first drafts of all the videos completed, and then I started to kind of build just like a skeleton for the website. And then from there, I kind of had that website skeleton. I just kind of had things in place, used my cat to demonstrate the parallax, and just make sure that was working. And then from there, I kind of built the actual background animations to implement into the website. And then it was getting those videos actually implemented onto the website, and figuring out how I wanted to embed those in there. And then it just kind of turned into a lot of just tweaking things just to make sure everything was working in the background. And that got me to here. So, whoops. I'm actually just going to take you guys over to the website right now and just kind of walk you through it. So, as you scroll down, you come across each section, which first greets you with kind of text, especially in the mobile, the text will stack on top of the video. And then allowing you to gain kind of like a good but not overwhelming amount of information about each topic. But you have like that readily available option to learn more. And then most excitingly, at least for me, was that you have these animated videos to watch to help like spark interest and teach you a bit about each topic. So I'm just gonna play for you guys the active recovery video real quick. All right. So then as you continue to scroll down, you'll notice this same kind of system for each thing. The same organization and stuff. And then as we get to the bottom here, the other important thing is you've got this navigation system over on the side here. And I've specifically placed it on this right side here because ideally this will be accessed on mobile. So then it's right where your thumb would normally be. And then it works on all platforms. The whole site is set so that it adjusts accordingly to whatever platform you're using. And everything is responsive and usable on anything you want to use it on, like mobile or anything else. So yeah, that's kind of the overall website. So, before I end my presentation, I owe a huge thank you to these 2 people. My main mentor was Lauren Daly, who was an ex-professional world-class rugby player. And then she's also a current business owner, and she was a huge help with like content creation and design, and like figuring out what I needed to include in this. And then another huge thank you to Ian Hale who gave me a lot of feedback with the animation, and then he also pretty much taught me how to do a lot of that just through taking his animation classes with him. So thank you guys so much for listening. Do you have any questions or anything?
Feedback from our reviewers.
Lynn, do you want to go first, or?
Go ahead.
All right, Allison, thanks so much for sharing your presentation. It's a really fun website. I love the aesthetic choices that you made. Animations and illustrations, super vibrant, fun colors. It's just like enjoyable to look at. In terms of just like a couple quick questions. So when is the time that people are going to be accessing this site?
Yeah, so ideally, I would have tried to incorporate it in a spot that people could interact with it after their workouts, or just come across it in a place in the gym. And that would have been experimented with had I had access to a gym.
Right.
That didn't really happen, but yeah, that was kind of the overall idea of how that would be encountered and interacted with.
Cool, thanks. Yeah, so I think what you would have found with that, if you were able to do that testing, was is really kind of useful ideas of structuring the content. You know, people, if they're going to be at the gym, they're going to want something that's like really easily digestible, that they can kind of look at in sort of stepped chunks.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to want to read a big paragraph of text, and they might not even want to watch a video. So just structuring the content a little differently could really sort of help tell that story in a way that will be much easier to digest in that specific context. So I would recommend, you know, I think it's a really interesting idea, and you should continue to work on it. But I would recommend looking at just at some different information about making content more scannable, visually scannable, sort of structuring text. So, you know, it's really just short. You don't really want big paragraphs of text most of the time, especially on a site like this. People should be able to just kind of look at it quickly, kind of get the gist of it. If they want, they can read a little bit deeper, but you know, think big bullet points like step 1, step 2, step 3, and then kind of get it across that way. And for the videos, I would recommend a similar thing. Like, I think it's cool that you're trying to get like a different form of communication in there, and that's helpful for someone who doesn't necessarily want to just like read the paragraph of text, but maybe having some other sort of mechanism like a slideshow, something someone could flip through to get that same information would be helpful. Because just kind of looking at the videos too, like one thing I noticed is, you know, you get the Chrome of YouTube, and sometimes as you were presenting, like that was kind of going over the text that was really important and useful. So I could see that being kind of like a frustrating user experience, because you have to kind of like rewind and say like, oh, what was that text I just missed? But anyway, kudos, great work.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, I'll second what Dan just said. Like, kudos for all the work, because that is not easy to like do all the content, the asset creation, and the building of the site for desktop, tablet, mobile. Great job on tackling such a huge, a huge project. I've also, I just have to say, I'm a big fan of your animated GIFs in your presentation. Great work. those go into all my presentations. I really love those, but I kind of was expecting to see animated GIFs on your site instead of videos, because those to me seemed like a simple way to communicate. That's kind of where I was going when you were talking about like, like, you know, the user is this new to working out, and like they need small bite-sized amounts of content. And in my mind, I just went to animated GIFs because that's kind of what was in your presentation too. So I thought you were leading us down that path. So I'm kind of with Dan in that if the context of where people are when they are looking at your site is super important. And I know you are like clearly very skilled and have a ton of expertise in this area. And I think just breaking it down the way you did into those like 3 areas is really good for somebody who's new. But I think maybe finding some users to talk to about what's important to them or what are the things they're curious about before starting the storyboarding would give you some more ideas on how to narrow that content down. Just talking to a few random people would, I think, getting those that feedback would help alleviate some of that pressure on you to figure those things out yourself. So yeah, congrats again on like creating such a big project, getting it all done, and it looks great. I would encourage you to continue to iterate and make the content into even like more snackable pieces for people.
Cool, thank you.
Great, and that's our time. Next up is Bella, Dan, and Bo. Just got to say, love the backgrounds. Go team. You're up.
All right, hi everyone. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen.
All right, and we'll get started. So hello, I'm Bella, and I also have Bo and Dan with me, and we're Artable. So what is Artable? So I'm gonna start with the story. So I have a friend, and she is also an emerging artist. She works 2 jobs, goes to school full time, and just doesn't have the time to set up a platform to sell her art. And this is where Artable comes in. So Artable is an online marketplace that gives emerging artists a platform to sell their art, whether it's physical, digital, or any other kind of medium. And it allows art buyers to purchase quality art while knowing that they're supporting these emerging artists. So why is Artable? It's helpful for emerging artists to get their feet off the ground. We provide this foundation and set up this website that allows students and emerging artists to use and get the exposure needed to get their business started. So we take care of this foundation and allow the artists to grow within our platform. And through this, artists gain access to a back-end dashboard that allows them to upload and sell their art and kind of handle business as if it was their own website.
And so going back to Bella's story here, there's actually a really simple reason that why a friend like hers would have a problem. And that's because there's really no solution on the market right now that caters to these emerging artists to really get their foothold in the market. So platforms like Artsy, which is in the bottom left there, tailor to those really expensive pieces of art from those really seasoned artists. So you could buy things like, maybe not Da Vinci, but you know, those high-end $10,000, $100,000 piece art pieces off of a website like this. Etsy, which most of you have probably heard of, has lots of different products on there and has tons of competition. So in order to get a foothold here and really stand out, it's quite hard for an artist just starting out. So that's why we're aiming to be the solution on the market that tailors to these emerging artists to get their real foothold in the market. So in order to do this, we started with building off a platform called Shopify. This allowed us to get our product out on the market really quickly. And then on top of that, in order to get this 2-sided marketplace, we had to learn the language behind Shopify, which is called Liquid. And we had to integrate all these plugins in order to set up a system that essentially allows artists to go in and make their own marketplace and sell, and also do things like shipping, payments, all of this. It's all integrated within the site. And then all this is put together so that we can support artists through our website.
Right, so we started out by just making some mock-up designs. We started in Illustrator doing kind of low fidelity prototype look and feel of how we wanted the site to look. And then we moved on to more interactive prototypes using Figma and Adobe XD, so we could kind of test out how these designs that we were making worked, what our look and feel looked like of the website, and get a few people to test it out and see how they would click through, how they would use it, which kind of gave us more of a more of a feel for how we actually wanted to implement the site. So these prototypes were super important for us in prototyping not only the look and feel, but also the interactivity of the website. And so that brings us to our result, which is artable.com. It's currently live, and we're going to go ahead and click on it and just take a quick look through of the site. So this is the homepage. When you come to the Artable website, it's all about supporting emerging artists. So we can see here the featured artwork on the homepage. This is updated with the most recent artwork that has been posted. We can see the names of the artwork as well as the price and the artist who made it. So if we want to go ahead and click in to one of these works, we can see a description of the art. We can see the medium, the dimensions of the art. We can go in and take a closer look. This looks like a sculpture. And so say we wanted to see more art by this certain artist, we could go ahead and click on their name, and that'll bring us to their artist profile. So each artist is given a profile when they sign up, and it'll have all of their products here on the website that they're selling. You can have a photo of the artist as well as contact them if you want to ask a question or potentially ask them about a commission or some custom piece of artwork. We have, each artist has their own policy, which they can define themselves. Each artist has a description about who they are. So basically, yeah, that's the artist profile page. So say we wanted to see a piece of art by Marcus here, we could check it out, go ahead and add it to the cart. And up here, you'll see it's added to the cart. So that's basically the profile and the artist page. We have also this tab at the top that shows all the artists that are currently on the site selling their work. So we could go ahead and click into Ed here. He has, looks like some photography here, so we can go ahead and same thing, check out his work, and say we wanted to buy it, we can go ahead and add it to cart, and now we can see that we have 2 items in our cart. The final way that you can navigate through the site is by medium. So say we wanted to look at more photography, we can go ahead and click in our collections page and look at all the photography that we currently have available on the site. Obviously, we have the cart over here, which shows what you have in your cart. You can remove it or change the quantity, whatever, just like a normal shopping cart would be. You can go ahead and check out using PayPal or Google or anything else that you'd like to do. So that's kind of the front end of the site. And then we provide also, if you click here, you can go ahead and log in. And this is the seller dashboard. So I'm logged in now, and we can see that in the products page, artists can go ahead and click. They can go up here on the top right, add a product, or they can edit or delete products that they currently have in the site. So this is the dashboard that the artists will see on their end. And they'll be able to go over here and change their profile, see how many orders they have, as well as go into the dashboard, see any sales they have, statistics from their store, earnings that they may have gotten. So yeah, that's the part of the site that the artists will see when they are selling their work. It's super easy to use and intuitive for them to be able to update their artwork and post pictures and sell it. So yeah, that's the site. It's artable.com. You can go ahead and check it out. It's available now. So I'm going to go back to this and say thank you so much. And if anyone has any questions, let us know.
Great. We'll turn it over to our reviewers.
I'll go first this time. Great job, you guys. This is awesome. I think it's like cool that you're making a product for like your fellow classmates and friends, so that they can kind of start their careers and kind of have like a space to sell their work. Could you just pull back up the website itself? There was one thing that I noticed on the site that just from like a UX experience, yeah, like, so here you have the main navigation at the top, but when you click into the individual artists pages, if you want to learn more about an artist,
Right.
you click on them. Oh, okay. So you had just scrolled down. I was missing the navigation. I was like, oh, where'd the navigation go? How do you get back? So I didn't realize that you just scrolled down. So that's cool. Yeah, I mean, I like that, you know, I mean, it's simple. Like kind of like a gallery would be in terms of like the site itself. It feels, you know, like a little, maybe a little too, maybe a little too simple just from the look and feel. Like the logo is the only thing that tells me that this is like a unique site. You know, maybe like if you scroll back up to the logo, yeah, I don't know. There might be something else that you can do in terms of like typography that would be, you know, specific to this site that would say Artable, not just like any random shop, so that I know that I'm always on Artable. Maybe there's just something else that could be added. I see that there's this like this kind of like rosy color for the seller products, but that was the only like other color besides white and black that I saw associated with the site. So maybe there could be like more in terms of a color palette that would be specific to the brand itself, to just kind of tell that story that this is an established brand and that like these are emerging artists that are worth the time and effort, right? But otherwise, I think you guys did a great job in doing the whole front and back end, and you know, allowing everybody to kind of manage their own site is super great, so that you guys aren't kind of stuck doing that. So good job.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with Lynn. Wow, like you guys really tackled a lot of stuff. You really got right into the whole e-commerce experience, and I'm sure it was really educational for all of you to really think hard about all of these different moving parts. It's really complex, and great job sort of wrangling all of that. Yeah, to echo, well, I guess it's a little bit different, but it just in terms of the design, one of the things that I was noticing from the homepage to the artist pages is you have to do a lot of scrolling in order to see the art. The homepage in particular, you know, you kind of like lead with, you have a pretty large masthead, and then there's the, if we can just pull it up for a sec. So, then there's like the name of the site, and then the tagline right underneath it. And it forces all of the featured artwork. It's really not being featured. It's like you have to scroll to get to it. So what I would love to see is some way of sort of rethinking that and really like putting the artist first and their art first, and thinking, you know, if you're thinking of this site as like a conduit for these artists to sell stuff, like I think making sure that the art is really prominently displayed, and that you can view it in a way that that is really going to help sell it. I wasn't sure, like on one of the art pages, you're kind of clicking in, and it's cool that you can zoom in to see some of the detail. What I'd love to see is, you know, examples where maybe there's multiple views. We didn't see an example, and I'm assuming that maybe you kind of thought about that, but like for something like a sculpture, you definitely want more than just like one photo to represent that. So just thinking about that. And then the other thing I was just thinking about is, as a buyer, do I have any kind of profile? I know that's one thing that I love about Etsy is like there's a certain aesthetic that of types of things that I look for. You know, kind of Etsy knows that I love sort of prints and specific like woodblock type style things. And it always, when I come to the site and sign in, it's like showing me that stuff right away. I'd love to be able to see some of that in a next iteration of this.
I would point out just one last thing, just looking at this right here is, you know, if it's possible to make all the images the same size so that the content about the artist isn't like bumped up higher or lower than another, so that you can quickly read across like who those people are, instead of like trying to find where the information is that you're looking for.
Yeah, that stood out to me as well. And I know that's like, it's tricky.
Yeah,
because
definitely
art and it's different sizes, but
Right.
there are ways of doing it.
good work, guys.
Yeah,
Well,
great.
thank you guys so much, and we look forward to, incorporating a lot of these suggestions and keeping this going. So thank you guys so much.
Good job.
Thank you.
Really good feedback. Great. Next up is Becca Salisbury.
Yes, hi. Okay. Can everyone see my presentation? Yes, okay. Well, cool. I'm Becca Salisbury. I'm from Austin, Texas. I'm a senior technology arts and media student at the University of Colorado at Boulder, of course. And for my capstone project, which I will share with you all today, I hope to combine my passions for art, design, and well-being while contributing something positive to others in the world. The transition to living autonomously that we all go through, either as college students, recent graduates, young adults, or otherwise, brings exuberant excitement and empowerment, but not without challenges. Navigating change, added distractions, and the responsibilities of adulting is a lot, and sometimes caring for our bodies slips to the bottom of our list of priorities, or sometimes we develop poor habits due to stress. According to the American College Health Association, a 2004 study revealed that only 7% of students ate the recommended daily amounts of fruits and vegetables. Even worse, our school in particular, CU Boulder, reported nearly triple the national average of eating disorders among women and double the national average for men in 2011 compared to other college campuses. Having struggled with this transition myself and knowing many others who also have, I know how important our health and well-being is. I've created Nourish, an online source of easy, healthy, delicious, and affordable recipes to inspire and enable others like me to care for themselves and to find the enjoyment in doing so. There are cookbooks for beginners out there aimed at solving a similar problem, but my target audience is made up of people who are mostly living in temporary homes like apartments and rented houses, so investing money into more possessions to have to move or discard at some point anyway is not appealing. Websites are more accessible and require less commitment. There's also a plethora of cooking blogs and recipe accounts out there, like Tasty, for example, but I wanted to emphasize health and flexibility with my recipes and see how the results would differ if my recipe website relied on illustrated steps instead of food porn or paragraphs of text. So creating the site meant a lot of wireframing the different screens, coding the pages, drawing the illustrations, cooking and writing out the recipes themselves, and user testing my prototypes along the way. So I was mostly using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript for implementation. And initially, I envisioned a landing page to introduce the site with an illustrated story and parallax scrolling. Although it was useful to learn how parallax scrolling works, I realized that the page had too much text and it did not fit the aesthetic of the rest of my site, which was had a very fresh, clean, and minimal feel. I also initially assumed that I needed to include photos of the food in order to entice users to want to cook the recipes. But after my process presentation to my class, I received feedback that the class actually preferred the aesthetic of my presentation, which looked much like this PowerPoint, opposed to the aesthetic with the photos and the other introduction page that I just showed you. So after discussions with my advisors, I realized that it would be more cohesive and more unique if I use solely illustration on the entire site. So in the end, my website looked like this. We come to this landing page that kind of explains briefly what the site is. We enter to the home page. You can see the different recipes. You can hover over and see what they actually are. You can filter by the type of meal if you wish. There is a little about page that provides more context about the project and about the creator. It links to my portfolio. But if we go back to the home page, we can go into one of these recipes. And it starts with the ingredient list. And there are breadcrumbs at the bottom that kind of guide the user through the various steps. And the pages are built to, or they're designed to be pulled up as the user's cooking, and they can easily just click through either on their desktop or phone or iPad. And actually, I will show you, if we were on a mobile, it would look something like this. And then at the end, I also gave some different flavor and seasoning ideas, just in case people get used to a recipe and they want to have more ideas that'll keep them from getting bored of the recipes too quickly. Jumping back here. And then before I conclude my presentation, there are some notes that I wanted to include. Firstly, that if you spend more time on the site, you'll notice that all the recipes are vegetarian, coincidentally, even though I don't explicitly advertise that anywhere. And this is partially because I just don't know how to cook meat. I'm not vegetarian or vegan, but I just never learned. But also because I would love to see eating and cooking less meat at home just become a normal concept one day that does not need to be labeled or announced. A second note is that I intentionally stayed away from listing specific quantities in my recipes. Firstly, because I wanted the recipes to be flexible enough to be made either for one person for one meal, to be meal prep for one person for the whole week, or to be made for multiple people at one time. And secondly, because I obviously am not a nutritionist, and I believe in intuitive eating, and I did not feel comfortable suggesting how much one person should cook or eat for themselves. And then another note is that the style of drawing I use is called contour. It's just where you try to draw without picking the pencil up. And I especially love this style because it's minimal and simple and emphasizes the feeling of an item more than the item itself. And the flaws in the drawing end up being the most beautiful and human parts of it, which is why I felt like it was such a good fit for the site. And lastly, I would just say that time allowing, I would love to continue adding more recipes and more complex recipes to the site over time. But thank you so much for your time, and let me know if you have any questions.
Wow. Your illustrations are stunning. Like,
thank you.
That they are by far the best part of your site. Like, they're really beautiful. And I have not seen a site about food that's just strictly illustrations, and I think that completely sets it apart. I think you did did a really smart thing there, because it makes it feel super different, really sets it apart, and makes you want to explore and understand what is this new take on food. I also really appreciated how you spoke about the site and how you didn't want to label things as vegetarian or not. I mean, not that because you didn't know how to cook meat, but also because you didn't want to put the labels there. And I just think that there's something interesting too about you and your perspective, and should be included in the site, because I think it adds it just adds value really to why somebody should be interested in this specific site. I will say that if you can go back to some of the imagery of the site, or some of the the site itself, the illustrations are amazing. Again, but I would say I had a difficult time as you were scrolling, just cognitively understanding what each of the things were. Mm-hmm. And to me, I feel like just even a swath of a watercolor, something would just be just a simple one color on each illustration would then convey exactly what it is. I don't know if those are apples or peppers.
Okay.
You know, and so I don't know what to click on because I'm not sure exactly what it is. But I think a color can be really beautiful and subtle, but also convey a little more information to the user.
Okay.
That would
Yeah.
be my only suggestion.
I agree with that.
Yeah, echo everything Lynn said about the illustrations. They're so fun. I love cooking. I spend a lot of time finding different recipes online. And I feel like New York Times, since COVID-19 happened, they've started to do more of this sort of like loosey-goosey, you know, more like instructional cooking versus a recipe with like measurements and things. And I feel like this is kind of tapping into that in an interesting way. I think what there were a couple things. The one I just wanted to say about your presentation, I agree with Lynn. The way that you talk about your inspiration for this was great to hear. What I would have loved to see is a little bit more of like slides to sort of tell that story. We were kind of looking at the backpacker and the mountain slide for a really long time. And, you know, I know your style is doing these illustrations, but maybe just in terms of like the research, you can kind of break out of that. And you had a lot of like stats and facts, but it was a little hard to sort of stay engaged and follow along with that. So just in terms of presentation style, I would maybe just think about that a little bit more from the audience perspective. Also, the splash page, I thought the tagline, maybe you could make that a little punchier. Considering, you know, if the audience is kind of like younger people who maybe don't have a lot of stuff to like, you know, cooking gadgets and gear, like maybe just sort of tap into that a little bit more.
Yeah, like the value prop of why you're.
Yeah, this is a little clinical.
Agreed.
And the other thing that I would just think about more is the navigation. So how do people find information on this site? It seems like just based on the kind of use case you were describing, you know, maybe someone doesn't have a lot of stuff. So being able to navigate and sort of find things based on either the types of gadgets you have or the types of ingredients you might have might be interesting ways to sort of think about this. You know, if you're someone literally living like, you know, in a sort of temporary space, you might have real limited resources in terms of the ingredients, and being able to use this site and search for things according to that could be really helpful. And then just the one last thing that kind of comes from sort of experience cooking and using recipes is I do like the way that you kind of break it out into these individual slides, but it's really important before you start a cooking project to have a sense of the overall like time it's going to take and what the steps are, so you're prepared for you're mentally prepared for step 4 while you're on step 1. You at least know what's coming up. So you know, while I appreciate the way you broke it up into bite-sized chunks and think you can kind of get some of that still, maybe just having like an outline, like, all right, these are all the things that you're going to do. Let's dive deeper into each of those things. Just so no one's caught off guard. It's like, okay, now put this in the refrigerator for 2 hours or something like that. You know, not that that's necessarily a step, but what if it is?
Totally, yeah. I understand where you're coming from, and I think you guys both just gave me a bunch of great feedback, and I really appreciate it. So thank you.
Thank you, Becca.
All right, thank you. I just want to throw out, I had one little tidbit in there. I actually have a cookbook from the 60s. I think the author, I think it's Joy of Cooking. I think the author is Vanderbilt. But the cool thing about it is it's illustrated by Andy Warhol and really similar to the design you did. So it was really cool to see that. Really
Oh, cool.
So, all right, next up is Allie Fowler.
Yes, hello, sorry. Okay, am I visible? Yeah, sick. Let me share my screen. Can you see that? Yes, awesome, thank you. Okay. Hello, my name is Ali Fowler, and this is the Yggdrasil Project. In Nordic mythology, Yggdrasil is the great tree that connects the 9 worlds. It binds together the fabric of reality, connecting species and spaces. Like that great tree of myth, my Capstone project is intended to be a connecting piece. These days, nature can seem a world away from human life. The objective of the Yggdrasil project is to draw our lives and the natural world closer together and to remind us that we can take small steps every day to protect and connect with the world that we live in. The web component of the Yggdrasil project uses storytelling to inspire and rejuvenate readers, while the physical component of the project reminds readers to bring these messages with them out into the natural world. Humans suffer when we aren't exposed to nature. Richard Louve's book, The Last Child in the Woods, outlines the serious negative emotional, physical, and psychological impacts that children experience when they don't interact with the natural world. These consequences may begin when we are children, but they radiate out into our adult lives as well. Exposure to nature is linked with increased creativity and decreased stress in adults. So not only is not having nature in your life negative, having nature is extremely beneficial. These days, many people are haunted by a new psychological phenomenon, dubbed by the American Psychological Association as eco-anxiety. This is the feeling of impending doom and powerlessness due to the environmental crisis. While this can be a crippling condition, the treatment's rather simple. Most psychologists recommend practicing mindfulness and spending more time outside. When people are disconnected from nature, nature suffers too. When we aren't exposed to nature, we don't connect with the natural world and we have no reason to try to protect it. The powerlessness related to eco-anxiety is another branch of the same phenomenon. Without feeling connected to nature, people feel unable to enact change. Connecting people with their world via storytelling is nothing new. Humans of New York, Story Center, and 1 Degree Deeper all use storytelling to encourage people to be more emotionally connected to their surroundings. Story Center and Humans of New York both use stories to promote a human-to-human connection. 1 Degree Deeper uses storytelling to relate stories of what nature can do for people, but it doesn't include that relationship has to go both ways. Humans can and must help nature too. Yggdrasil channels that inspiration and appreciation of nature into empowerment to live more sustainably or learn more about the surrounding world. The physical component of the project, intended to encourage mindfulness and awareness while in the natural world, takes cues from other projects that place strange or unexpected objects outside to encourage viewers to slow down and think. I drew a lot of inspiration from British artist Rob Mulholland's Mere Silhouette project. Initially, I imagined this project to be much more of an artistic representation of interconnectedness. But after doing some user tests with a prototype, I realized that I needed to prioritize usability over artistic design in order to remain true to my goal of both inspiring and educating my users. When using the prototype, people were getting extremely frustrated because they couldn't find the information that they wanted and the navigation of the site was very complicated and obscure. This led me to create a much more traditionally structured project, really drawing a lot of inspiration from National Geographic's card layout. You can see my initial idea for the graphics and navigation on the site in the upper left, and then in the upper right is my wireframe for the current project without like 95% of the CSS. Which really does draw from the National Geographic card layout. So stories are the root of the Yggdrasil project. It uses margin notes, which are visible in the bottom left image, to connect these narratives to related factual information and simple steps that the reader can implement in their own life to protect the planet. The stories have been collected via interviews with a number of outdoorsmen who shared some of their most memorable nature experiences with me. These experiences range from the once-in-a-lifetime variety, like being the last group to hike without a guide and permit on the Incan Trail to Machu Picchu, to the more everyday, like going for a backpacking trip in the Rockies with your kids. In the lower left-hand margin of the GIF, you can see a margin note, which links to an article related to that section. Each story connects to at least one, and often many, facts or tips that have to do with the content of the story. For example, the Inca Trail was nearly destroyed by overuse and careless travelers. So that story connects to a tip about how we can protect our local trails. You can see the full text of the trail protection article in the lower right. The tips and facts are mostly and easily digestible lists and can be accessed en masse from the drop-down menu or the home page. They range from subjects like the psychological value of nature for children to the environmental impacts of coffee, which is the article in the scrolling image. Yggdrasil runs off of Firebase in the backend, which is a database that stores all of the copywriting. That comes to almost more than 40 pages of stories, facts, and tips. Each of the pages is generated from the database, and every time the site is refreshed, it's loaded using jQuery. Because sometimes we need a more physical reminder, Yggdrasil also has a material component, memory cues, if you will. The cues are laser cut from a natural biodegradable material, wood in this case, with a quote from a story on one side and a QR code on the other side that connects back to the digital text to help the reader bring messages or inspiration from the story out into practice in their daily lives. The memory cues are made to be placed in nature, in locations where a story took place. Seeing and interacting with these cues encourages mindfulness and helps people to identify what value the natural world has provided to their life. By encouraging people to actively think about and appreciate their interactions with nature, the physical cues are a step in combating feelings of powerlessness and disconnection. The Yggdrasil project combines research, writing, design, and code in order to inspire and inform readers. Without strong roots, change can't grow, and the Yggdrasil project has the stories, facts, and resources necessary to nurture that change. Thank you very much for your time. Are there any questions that I can answer at this point?
Dan, you want to start this one?
Sure.
Okay.
Thanks, Allie. Can you talk a little bit more about the cubes? I'm a little stuck on the cubes.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, not gonna lie, initially we were calling them lanterns, which is, they're meant to provide like illumination. Essentially, it's the idea that having a physical object to link back to the story, which they use the QR codes to link to the digital text, and the digital text usually has like a block quote that pulls out like a memorable moment or something, and it's to essentially just think, okay, this thing happened to this person in this place and it changed their life. So to encourage people who interact with the cues to kind of reflect on the value that that space could provide to them. Does that answer the question?
I think it's interesting. I'm not sure I question whether it's going to do what you said it will and produce mindfulness. The disconnect that I'm having is, you're in this beautiful space trying to connect to nature, and then you take out your phone and you instantly break that and pull yourself out of that space and go into something else. So that's the part of the project that I'm like, it's a hard sell. That said, I think the stories on the site and the overall like layout and content of the site seems really interesting. I like hearing about your process of sort of talking to these outdoors people and kind of gathering their information and sort of telling their stories on the site. I think that's great. But yeah, this is the part where I'm not totally sure how to respond to the whole like that whole bridging that gap between like being in these physical spaces and reading these interesting stories. Lynn, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking similar things about yeah, like just you're kind of you're breaking the call to action, I guess, in my mind was from the site. You said that you wanted to inspire and educate people. And what did you want to inspire them to do or think or feel? What was the thought behind that?
Yeah, so the idea is, I guess it kind of depends on the story,
Mm-hmm.
because the tips also range from, I mean, stuff like the effects of being or like cutting out meat once a week on the environment, to stuff like how can I compare whether or not I should drive to New York or fly to New York. So it really depends on what the story is that should link, because the stories, as much as I tried to find stories that were almost 100% positive, it really turns out that they're not out there. Every person that I talked to was like, yeah, I had this really great experience. I'll use the Inca Trail again, for example, but like, I had this great experience on the Inca Trail, except for the fact that it was covered with trash and pretty much falling off the mountain. And so it was taking stuff like that and saying like, okay, well, the inspiration that comes from that story and the motivation is to be a better caretaker of our trails. And
so you're inspiring people to take action and not just like have a feeling about something. You want them to like think differently and to take an action. So I think just going back to your goal for the site would also help you structure the content or the things you want people to take away from it a little more. Like, are the tips the little black thing on the side? Is that what the tip is? The educational piece on the scrolling one? That little black button that's outside the article?
Yeah, it's
okay. So it's really small and it's like 3/4 of the way down the page. And I understand that like you have to like read the narrative to like understand the point. But I think if that's your goal is to inspire people to take action, then you need to drive them towards that, and making that like visibly more prominent, talking people through like what they can do next steps, how they can better the environment based off of like the learnings of this story. Like there should be a little more clear call to action for the user, to get them to do what you're hoping this will inspire. So I think just like I really love that you had user tests, and I love that you set goals in the beginning. I think the goals needed to be just a little bit more specific, and then you need to go back and look at your site compared to your goals and see, is it really meeting those things? And maybe go back to the users and ask them, specifically, like, what action will you take after this? Or do you know what to do after reading this story? What does this inspire you to do? So that you can be more effective in your communication and how you want people to respond to your work. Because I think the work that you've clearly done like a ton of research, and you've like gone all across the board and like did some laser cutting, which is super cool. And building a website. So you've done tons and tons of work. So I would, encourage you to just continue with the user research to refine the site so that you can drive home those things that you're really passionate about.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, over halfway. We have 3 presenters left. Next up is Kyle.
All right. Hello. Can you guys see this? Cool. All right. Hello, my name is Kyle Fauché. My project is titled Atlas Archive. So basically, Atlas Archive is a web app for students to share their projects and see others' projects and learn from each other. And it's intended to serve as both a database of projects created within the Atlas program here at CU Boulder, as well as build a platform for community. So why did I create this app? So basically, throughout my time here at CU, I've found that I'm always super inspired by the incredible projects people are creating within the Atlas program. People create all kinds of mediums. You've seen some today. But it's very rare that we actually get to see what everyone's working on throughout the program. So you see what projects are being made within your classes, but you don't really see what's going on in other classes or on students' free time. So I wanted to create a place where that could all be consolidated and we can see everything people are working on within the program and kind of get an idea of what's going on. So the main two goals were to create a platform for encouraging students to submit their creative work, and in doing so, build a stronger community within the Atlas program, as well as have a consolidated record of projects that have been created in the past in the Atlas program for future use. So I initially started off obviously by looking at what exists already within the Atlas program in the realm of project sharing to see if anything kind of like this existed already. And I found that it didn't really exist yet. So right now, people, when they share projects, usually they have their own personal portfolio, their own personal blog, and they're on like all different websites. It could be a WordPress blog, could be a Squarespace website, what have you. And so it's all kind of all over the place, so not really a consolidated place for all the Atlas projects to live. And then there's also a website on the Atlas on the main Atlas website that has projects by graduate students and labs. And it's sort of like a curated list of projects, so only a few are actually posted, and it doesn't really meet the needs of all users, I don't think, because it doesn't allow undergraduates to just submit their own projects or just submit personal projects that are from outside of classes. So I found out that this definitely needs to exist within Atlas, and that was supported by my user research in the initial stages as well. And then for like design inspiration, I looked towards like websites like Dribble and Behance, Elo, so creative work sharing websites that are more like industry based and real world, just for like inspiration as far as like how to portray creative content, how to create an interactive experience with viewing creative content. So my process. It was really divided between doing the UI and the actual development, so I tried to split up my time fairly evenly between the two, so I didn't spend too much time just designing it and then get behind in the development or just develop it and end up with an ugly UI. So I tried to split it pretty well. So this is my initial prototype. I wanted to create something super simple, simple navigation, just to encourage people to like want to use it and not be intimidated by the idea of going to this website and submitting a project or viewing projects and it being super complicated. I did change some things from this initial prototype based on user studies. So this nav bar was a little bit confusing. I didn't really have it thought through very well as to like what a feed would be versus a discover page, or what the home page would be. So that was simplified in the final iteration. And I also got rid of the concept of likes that I have shown here. I talked to instructors and also students, and we found that that was probably going to be not necessarily conducive to an inclusive environment. It doesn't really make sense to have likes because people might be discouraged from posting projects, and what we really want to do is encourage projects being posted here. Cool. So my basic tech stack, React front end, and then Node and Mongo database back end, and then a few other libraries, Firebase for authentication, and it's deployed on Heroku. So I basically just started going through and starting with a super simple website, and then I would go through and like add in the CSS, and then slowly incorporate feature after feature. So sort of like an agile approach where I was like designing a new feature, then developing it, then integrating it until it's into like a working product, and then doing that over and over again until all the features had been included. So then I arrived at the final project. So this is Atlas Archive. Essentially, it's organized as like a 3-tab website. So the first tab is the Explore tab, where you can see all the projects in the website. So that's where you go to find projects. Then there's a tab to add a project, and then a tab for your user profile. So on the Explore page, there's like a sub-navigation to find different ways to filter projects. So there's a featured tab, which is basically a curated list of projects. So Atlas faculty have the ability to go in and feature certain projects that they find interesting, and then they'll show up on the featured page. And then there's a tab where you can see all projects, search the users, and then search the projects. The search feature allows you to search for people as well as search for tags. So projects are associated with tags that allow you to find different categories or technologies that are used for projects based on a tag. On the project page, you can see basically a longer write-up of each project, different images. You can comment on a project and see the tags that are associated with them. And then users have a profile, so you can have a list of all the projects you posted to the database, feature one of your projects. So you have your main project is like your header. You can edit your profile, things like that. And then when you're adding a project, it's super important that tags are added. So that's kind of how things can get organized and we can search through them. So users can add tags based on a category of a project. So if it's like a web development project or technologies they use, so different coding languages, or classes that they were made for, so that we can go back later and, for example, see what projects were made for like a web class, a certain Atlas class. So if a student in the future wanted to look into taking an Atlas class for web, they could see, oh, these are the kind of projects that have been made in this class in the past, so I kind of know what to expect in the future if I were to take this class. All right, so this website is currently hosted through Heroku. It's at this location. It's live, and we've already had some students submit projects. I'm super excited about that. It's going pretty well so far. Yeah, so I say thank you to Nick, Eileen, Shiva, and Matt. I think you're all here for all your help along the way. A lot of good feedback and guidance. Yeah.
All right, I'll turn it over to our reviewers.
All right, Kyle, thanks for thanks for sharing that. Yeah, it seems interesting and promising that you have some people using it already. It was nice to kind of see how this evolved over the stages. Some of the earlier screenshots, the text was so large in the UI. I was like, oh man, I hope that gets changed. So it was nice to see it kind of get pared down and refined a bit. I really like that the UI just lets the content stand out. It just looks like it's going to make it easy to kind of sort through things and kind of let the content really rule the experience. A few notes on just kind of things I saw along the way. Can you go back to the add project form?
Yeah.
It's 2 slides back. Yeah. Oh, yeah, this one. So I find just the layout of this a little confusing. You see, you're adding the tags in the left column, and then they're going over to the right column, which sort of kind of builds this relationship. Oh, when I do something in the left, it impacts the right side, but that's not the case for the title and summary. So I would maybe just like consider just in terms of like kind of really orderly sort of layout for a form, just kind of stacking things. So, you know, the main photo, additional photos, those things are kind of like in line with all of the other form fields. That way it's just, you're not going to miss anything, particularly because main photo is a required thing. I could definitely see that not registering in someone's mind as they're kind of filling all of this stuff out. So just kind of pulling it into that left-hand column where it's really going to stand out, especially because of the kind of gray. It almost like stands out in my mind when I first look at this as like, oh, that's disabled or something I'm not going to interact with. So kind of making sure that is really crystal clear is going to be helpful there. I also just wonder in terms of the content being displayed, if something like a date would be useful to see, especially if I'm like searching or just kind of like looking at that explore field. Maybe it doesn't matter, but I could see something like that being useful bit of information.
Thank you.
What was the URL again, Kyle?
Okay, this side. Okay.
Atlas-archive. Oh, Roku app.com. Okay. Cool. Because I definitely want to be able to come back here. Good to know. This is cool. I mean, it's so important to archive your work and to have like access to all the things that have been created, and especially I think like for for the Atlas students and faculty too, because a lot of this stuff just disappears into the ether. So I like that you're solving this like real world problem, that you're creating this archive for everybody to kind of look back at. It's really great. The main navigation I like because it's super, super simple, but I wonder if you could make it even simpler, because there's those three tabs, but it's, by putting them at equal spacing and hierarchy, it connotes that, or the connotation is that it's they're all the same level, but but it seems to me like that the main thing is the feed, and the other two are not needed unless you're a student and adding a project and looking at your profile. Maybe it could even be a little even more simple, so that those things are kind of like subtasks that you're not going to do every single time, but you're going to come back every single time and look at like this flow. But I really liked your design aesthetic. The only other thing that I would say that I kind of like was concerned about was the comments, because I worked at a bunch of different news sites like Newsweek, Daily Beast, and Martha Stewart, and comments have just like, they are a disaster to try and navigate. It's a disaster to try and get all of the like inappropriate words removed. And then also if there's just like a bunch of random like weird link farms like being created, right? So I would probably disable comments, because it's not really needed. Like, the projects speak for themselves. They can contact that person if they're so inclined to make a comment or to connect. But I just feel like comments like opens the door for like a lot of just weird seedy stuff on the internet that is, probably you want to remove from this experience. But otherwise, I think this is an awesome project. The design aesthetic's great, and I think you did a great job.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, next up, Alex. I saw you doing some stretches, some pumping yourself up, and I'm also watching your time. So, all right, you're up.
All right. Let me grab this. Oops. And if I share screens, can you see that all right? Yes? All right, cool. So hi, I'm Alex File, and my project is called Fish City. Fish City is a platform for exploring a new kind of online learning, focused around connecting pre-existing educational content from across the internet. So we all are pretty familiar with the problems. College costs too much, and online alternatives that have popped up, Skillshare, Pluralsight, LinkedIn Learning, they prey off that high price tag and have high price tags of their own, especially for lower income students. Then alternatively, free online resources do exist, but they kind of lack structure, or missing in some core features that people trust in college. So my goal with this project was to create a platform where users could connect free floating content into logical paths for others to follow. So a couple of the alternatives that exist right now, one is called XB, and it's a growing solution with an excellent interface for practicing problems. Learning new content, on the other hand, is a little bit less of a desirable experience. any user claiming to be an expert on a topic can post an explanation without defending it or even linking to sources. And then the visibility of those explanations is left up to likes. So this person, Audrey, has posted this explanation of write an equation for a line in different forms, wrote it 4 years ago. They have 2 contributions to the whole website and no other further information. So kind of like is a dead end and not sure how trustworthy that is. Then Khan Academy, on the other hand, like very durable, very like rock solid content, but they pretty much have one content creator, and that's Sal Khan, and they always link back to their own content. So what if they don't have an explanation that makes sense to you? What if they don't have content on your subject? They have a really good list of content, but if they don't have information on your subject? So people searching for resources for their own, trying to do research on their own, are kind of left navigating. So that's where I'm kind of trying to come in. So from there, the core problem of the project became how to present that content and the content and the connections between them in an understandable and navigable way. I've thought through this problem a bit before in previous semesters, and I've been working on the idea for a couple of years. I spent this semester pursuing a city-based idea. And so the logic behind the platform comes from common answers to a couple of questions. So I can see your faces there. Raise your hand. Do you go to the internet to learn something new? David does. Hey, everyone does. Have you used a Maps app to navigate to a new place before? Never, David. Never. Okay, I got it. And then have you had a YouTube video assigned as homework, or has someone told you to go to YouTube to learn how to do something? Nice. All right. So if you understand those, you understand Fish City. So this is the draft interface I made, demonstrating navigating a path through the city. And then starting from there, I've spent the rest of the semester kind of building towards that goal, writing down features and deciding like what's necessary there. So what started out as an education website quickly became about procedural city generation and dynamic 3D geometry, problems that absorbed a lot of my time during the semester. But after making progress on those fronts and generating 14,000 building plots, I've created a basic UI and linked the whole project up to Google Firebase for the backend. Putting it all together, have kind of 2 sides. A platform, which is that top right, where users can log in and add/navigate resources in the city. And then a separate environment in that bottom left. And that is where users, it's where I've been prototyping UI, UX elements for how users might interact with data that's fairly complex and condensed in a city format. So after creating the city, I created a ton of unique UI challenges to make that navigable. And that's kind of where I focused those. So putting together those 2,222 lines of code, add it up, it's kind of funny. It's pretty darn close to what I was aiming for at the beginning of the semester. And all in all, this project isn't done for me. I was always planning on continuing to work on this project past the class. Moving forward, I've got a whole notebook worth of ideas to add to the platform. But for now, I'm really happy with what I was able to create, having never used Three.js before, having never created a platform, any kind of web project of this scale. And never having used Firebase outside of Eileen's class when I took that class. So really quick, this is what the city looks like right now. And it looks more like Fish Settlement than Fish City right now, but that's just because there's not a whole lot of content. When you click on something, it'll zoom in, give you a little preview of the information there, tags, category, and a thing there. And then you can click the link and it'll take you directly over to that resource. You can use the scroll on the mouse to go up or down in the building, and then click on other buildings and it'll take you over to there. Then you can add resources, and whenever you add a resource, it plunks it right into the map, visible for everyone else, and zooms you over to where it's placed. Then the other bit of that is where I've been testing out like how to navigate inside of a city. So the paths functionality, this is more of a demonstration of that, where it's this floor, and like you have to follow the path through the city. And the idea is at the end of that path, you've learned a set of skills and able to complete a project at some point. So that is that. That's where I'm at for now. Thank you very much. Also, one last thing. Does anyone know why it's called Fish City? I didn't explain that. What do you call a group of fish?
Cool.
School. And so the idea is it's a school, but it's only if we all work together and come together to build the content and the paths surrounding it. So thank you for coming to my TED Talk, and that's Fish City.
All right, our review. Our review.
What? This is bananas. I mean, in like the best possible way. Like, I don't think I fully grasp it. But yeah, so could you just explain to me again, like, so you go to these different buildings, and each building is like a particular topic. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the 14,000 plots thing I mentioned,
Yeah.
which took a lot of the semester, was creating procedural generation of like building plots. And so underlaying this whole map here, there are like, I wanted them to be unique so that when you visit them, you could revisit the same building and like have some sense of direction there where it's not all just rectangles. So when you add a resource, say like I had, I was just looking up like modern JavaScript. So you have the URL, you go into the platform and then add the URL, say modern script. I'm just gonna put in like random tags and things for the rest of this. But it's based off of tags. So if you put JavaScript, if it can't find that tag on the map before, it creates a new, what I'm calling them tag capitals, and then finds a point on that map, finds the cell that that lands in, and then finds the building plot that lands in. So things should generally be grouped by tags by content. And so then if you're looking in the same neighborhood, you should be able to find like JavaScript web development in the same area, and then that kind of thing. Does that explain?
Yeah. So then each floor is like a different.
Each floor is a different resource.
It's a different resource that's related to that particular content.
Yeah. So actually, I put in these before intro to Express.js, and then modern JavaScript got tucked right there, and CNC and stuff is over here. So when you scroll up and down, each floor of the building is a different resource, and then you can visit those, or in the future, add them to paths.
And they're all YouTube videos?
You can be a YouTube video. It could be like I've been learning a ton from this one guy had like a full text tutorial on like procedural generation for dummies, and so like you link out to that. It's any kind of a link, so it doesn't have to be YouTube. Yeah. So
it doesn't have to be okay. Whoa! I feel like I need a class on how to use this. I mean, but it's so compelling and it's so interesting, especially for me, somebody who like comes from a GIS background and web, and like, so like locations and space make a lot of sense to me. And like, I think connecting that visually to like a space on the internet is like such a cool idea. Like, to me, this feels like an art project, more so than like a intuitive like resource in that sense. Like, I feel like it would take, like, I would love to use it, but I feel like it would take me a little bit of time to kind of get up to speed on how to do it. But it's such a cool, like, different way of thinking about building a resource in a visual way, which I think it kind of taps into like different learning styles. And I'd be curious if you could like do an audit on your site to see like how many different learning styles it incorporates. And if there's things that are missing, because I think it does feel a little sterile at times. And like, even just seeing the link, the like pop out from the side, it doesn't give me a good sense about where I'm actually going to go next.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it's going to be a video, if it's going to be text. Maybe I only want to watch videos. So like maybe giving the user some other kind of indication about like where they're going when they leave this site, and kind of what type, maybe even the building or like the floor color or whatever is like associated to the type of content you're about to go to. Like maybe there's other ways that you can communicate what that is, because to me it's just kind of a bit of a black box, and it's kind of like a I'm feeling lucky button, you know?
That's fair. Yeah.
But this is like super fascinating. I would love to like spend more time looking at it and talking about it, because it's really cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, Lynn, I definitely wanted to let you have first say on that, because I knew you about some of the spatial.
Right.
Alex, really, I really appreciated your presentation.
Thank you.
Sort of conversational tone of it. There's a lot of humor kind of injected in everything. Can we just go back to the UI for a second? I did a project, a sort of learning project for a client last year, and looked a lot at a lot of these competitors like Chegg and Bartleby and things like that. And I love Khan Academy. I've been looking at that as a reference for years. And what this reminds me of is that aspect of the site that's like, I think it's constellations, where you can kind of explore your knowledge map through these constellations, and like clicking on something shows all of the connections to other things. So that's kind of like what this reminded me of. It's like a component and a way to sort of visualize branching topics and knowledge, and sort of how things are all interconnected. But yeah, what's missing right now is the more utilitarian UI, where it's just like, all right, how do I actually find things and like do it? And I agree with Lynn, just like sort of seeing the little preview of something along the side as a starting point would be good. But like text, as you're kind of hovering over the different nodes, would be super helpful. Seeing those connections would be super helpful. So I think this is a great start. I think you've done a lot of really interesting work. But next is just like get in front of some humans and do a little work on it first, and then get it in front of some humans and see what kind of feedback you get. But it's a great, it's an interesting project. Right now, it as Lynn said, it's more of an art thing than a resource. But I think by doing some testing and kind of building this component of the UI, you can get it there.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Definitely going to keep working on it.
Awesome.
Super cool idea.
Thanks.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Our last presenter for this session is Mariah.
All right, let me just share my screen. All right, can everybody see it? Yes, perfect. Awesome. So, hi, my name is Mariah, and my project is called Geological Projection. So the reason I wanted to make this project is I love geology. I will even go as far as to say that geology rocks. And I wanted to create a project that highlights the danger of flooding, because flooding is the most frequently occurring water disaster each year. And part of the reasoning for this is that global warming is increasing the temperature of the planet, which causes glaciers to melt faster, which adds more water to our water system. And the infrastructure that we built years ago to combat flooding is failing, because this increased amount of water flowing through the rivers is just increasing the amount of erosion. And the water's just really overflowing a lot of our levees. So the damage that is created by flooding varies a lot. It can be as little as a little bit of seepage into your basement or a complete loss of home. And so people who have never lived in areas that have been impacted or don't know people who have been in flood zones don't know the dangers of flooding. So I wanted to create a project I wanted to create an interactive project that would help inform its users about the ecological and economic impact of floods. So when I was starting to come up with this project, my Capstone 1 professor, Shiva, showed me Limud Tables, which is a projection installation that taught its users about a synagogue it's located in and surrounding city in New York. I had the idea to combine it with an installation I'd seen in my hometown that taught children about the erosion the Platte River causes each year. I thought that I could take both of those separate ideas, combine it with my love of geology, and make a project. So using the interaction provided by the projection and the fun of a running river from the sandbox, I wanted to show people how far floods could reach and tell them why it's important that they know about floods. I chose to focus on 10-year, 100-year, and flash flooding because 10-year and flash floods are relatively common, while 100-year floods usually cause a catastrophic amount of damage because they have a very low chance of occurring each year, and there's not much people can naturally do to prepare for this. So how it works is I have constructed a scene with a bird's eye view of a valley that has a scale of ½ inch and the scene to 10 miles in real life. It works by having the user select different objects such as cars, fences, and houses, moving them around the scene to create a community with absolutely stunning riverside views. So once the user is content with where all the projects are placed, they can then move on to selecting which type of flood they would like to see their community encounter. They can hover over each button on the right-hand side of the screen and see how far each different type of flood reaches. There will also be information displayed at the bottom right-hand side of the screen that talks about the different type of floods and their ecological and economic impact. So the objects in my scene are not washed away by each river so that the user can continue to see the impacts of each different flood on the scene that they've made. So the projection element of my project is using the Mecha Markers library developed by Clement Zhang and Peter Boyry. Mecha Markers are a technique for making and sensing physical inputs for 3D interfaces. They are buttons, toggles, knobs, and sliders that have 2 sets of QR codes on the bottom of them. They are set on a transparent tabletop with a camera and projector beneath them. And when the objects are not being used, the base set of QR codes are displayed and don't trigger an interaction. But when you twist, push, or slide the objects, the second set of codes are displayed, which triggers an interaction that you're seeing right here. Using the Mecha Marker library in tandem with processing 2 is how my interaction works. I have QR codes in the bottom of each of my physical objects placed on top of my tabletop. And when the camera senses them moving, it digitally moves the objects in processing and leaves the objects in. So to start everything off, I started by making my projection stand. And it's made out of wood and wood paneling with a textured fabric around the top. The reason I decided to add the fabric was because I thought it looked a lot like a shelf with the wood going all the way up the side. It's 3 feet 8 inches tall, and the acrylic screen on top is 2 foot 4 inches wide with 2 foot 4 inches long and 1 foot 3 inches wide. In order for my projector to stand to work, it needed to house my laptop, camera, and the projector all inside. So I created a shelf at the bottom of my stand that would be able to hold the weight of my laptop and make sure the projector was supported so it couldn't be knocked over. So the background that I created was using Adobe Illustrator. In my first few iterations of the background, I was using a vector image because I was really focusing on getting the interaction of moving the objects around the screen. As my project progressed, I figured I really need to make my own background, so I based my background, which the final one is in the bottom right-hand corner, off of the vector image I saw. And a lot of the different objects you see in the screen, such as the buttons on the very right-hand side and the road, are different objects that I've made in Illustrator and loaded into processing later. The reason I did this is because processing has a hierarchy. With my base background loaded in first, if I'd put the little buttons in my actual background, my river overlay would have covered them. So I decided to add them in last so they would be seen throughout the entire project. So as you've heard, the platform I'm using is Processing 2. I decided on using an older version of the app because it was allowing me to use GIFs, and the animations that you see before you are made using GIFs. I made these also in Illustrator and Photoshop. And I decided to use GIFs because instead of a traditional coded animation, because it gave me more control over the look and feel of my rivers. My scene is rather cartoon-like, and I wanted the rivers to keep with that theme, and I found that using GIFs just really let me capture that a little bit more. So the different information that is being displayed at the bottom of the screen corresponds to each animation and goes into some detail about the ecological and economic impacts of it. I focus more on the economic impacts because they directly affect the user, and many people do not prepare financially for disasters like this, and in an event such as a flood, if it took away their house, they might not have enough money to move or even rebuild. The environment factor is very important, and the environment is greatly impacted by flooding, but floods have been happening for thousands and thousands of years, and the environment recovers. It just takes a lot of time. So thank you guys for listening, and I'd like to give a special thanks to Ellen Du and Clement Zhang for helping me with the projection elements of my project, and for Shiva for really giving me a lot of guidance that I needed. Thank you guys.
Could you explain again how the mecha makers, is that what it is?
Yeah.
How that is incorporated into your project? Like, are you using those to like build a city around that area? Or I think I missed it.
Yeah, so initially my project included a very large projection stand with physical objects on the top in the shape of houses, rivers, and cars that you would physically be able to move around the screen that would move a superimposed car or fence in my actual scene. I didn't end up quite finishing with that project because with the whole virus thing that's going on, because my stand is very large and I have a very small apartment. So that was the initial aspect of it. I was going to have the user physically make a scene, moving something, and then just be able to take my object off of the scene and just discard it, essentially, so you could see the animation.
Okay, so that was what you were working towards building, or did you change it?
Yes, I was working towards building that. I eventually just did the screen-based version of it using my laptop. Because it wasn't, I didn't alter the code a lot, just took out the mechanism.
Okay, so then now you can use it like as a web experience.
Yes.
Is that right? Cool. And so, sorry, one more question. So then now you have the ability to add houses and trees and then see kind of what happens to if a flood happens in that area. Is that right?
Yeah, so if you were to take like your little house and design a little city, I guess next to a river, you could hover over one of my buttons and see how far the actual flood would go. And in the bottom part of my screen, it would tell you what the type of flood is, why it happens, why it's important that you know about this.
Cool. Interesting. I'm actually working on a project now to expand an AR flood app for FEMA. They launched it last year. It's called Floodwalk, and it's down at Confluence Park, downtown Denver. But you can also use it offsite. So I think like the idea of like communicating flood, just flood knowledge and education is super interesting and like very necessary, especially in Colorado where there's lots of flash floods. I think like, I guess going from the tabletop, which like looks like you did a ton of work there, which that is not easy to do, a project like that, and then switching it over to the web, it changes like the context of like the space you're in, and then like kind of like your mental model, and like, I know that that definitely like adds a lot of complexity to your project to have to like shift it, going from a physical thing to a strictly web-based digital experience. So I can appreciate that. There's a lot of hurdles there. I would just, I guess, encourage you to go back to your site now and kind of think about how the interactions work in your site versus the tabletop, and if there's things that need to be adjusted because of the medium itself. And then I couldn't really see the interface as detailed, I think, because there were 4 on the screen. But I think on the right-hand side, there were some buttons. But just the color choice was like, they sort of blended into the background. It was just hard for me to understand like what were the actions that could happen, because the colors were very similar to the colors in the background. So I wasn't sure where to interact with the site. But I would just take another look at those things too.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Could you remind me like who the audience is for this?
It's just people who would like to learn more about floods. I think who I really had in mind is people who would be moving maybe into a flood zone and didn't know a lot of the dangers of it, even know that flood zones are really a thing. I know from speaking to a lot to my friends and family about natural disasters, they don't really know more than just the bare minimum. So if they were to move to like Louisiana and live on a delta, they'd have be a pretty big shock.
Yeah, yeah. That's interesting. I don't know practically, like I don't know if anyone is necessary. I mean, I guess when you're getting your insurance and stuff, they tell you you're moving into a flood zone, but
Yeah.
it's kind of hard to imagine someone like, let me just set up the town and see what happens to it. I could see this working better with in like an educational setting with younger kids. Like in your thing that you had at the beginning, you showed that one picture with all the kids playing at the table, and so I kind of had that in my head, but then I wasn't totally sure. So I think you know, to continue with this, you would really want to like really define that user type. Like who is it really that I'm trying to talk to with this, because that's going to determine sort of like how this evolves. And right now it's a little muddy. It's very muddy. So figuring that out will help a lot. And then to Lynn's point, and I know this was kind of like a last minute shift to things, so I'm guessing a lot of it is because of that. But in terms of visuals, really thinking through contrast, making sure there's that the UI is really intentional. There were things I noticed, the text area at the bottom is very difficult to read, black text on that dark color, and I'm colorblind, so I'm particularly sensitive to these things. I found that really hard to read, and also just because it's just like a big paragraph, that makes it a little less easy to read. So thinking, I've given a few people this feedback so far, but just thinking a little bit about how that information is displayed, particularly after you figured out, is this for kids or not? Then you'll be able to sort of figure out kind of like the best way to style that for children or adults or whomever. And then totally agree with Lynn's thing about the UI elements, making sure those are really separate from the thing happening behind. And in some of them, I even saw the flood like taking over the buttons, and it's like, whoa, that's a really bad flood if it's ruining your UI. And then finally, just like the line quality on some of the objects. You had like the standard house and then like the fancy house. And the fancy house was like super thin lines, and then everything else had like a thicker line. So just being consistent and intentional with those design choices would be helpful.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Oh, I would add one last thing to everyone, because you guys all have like your web-based projects, and to Dan's point, it's super important that you run your site through like in accessibility, just like from the visual design standpoint, just like run it through like a little accessibility QA. And make sure that everything is accessible. That is like a huge deal in the work that I'm doing in advertising now, because people and companies and sites are all getting sued left and right because accessibility is like really a big deal. And those things are very important for for things on the web. So just another thing to think about.
All right, thank you. I want to do a super shout out. Thank you to our reviewers, Lynn and Dan. Feedback was incredible. And just want to say these are really strong projects, and I'm proud of all of you. Good job getting through. I mean, uncertain times, and definitely, you guys came through. And you should be. I'm really proud. You should be really proud. We have. We're going to take a 15-minute break, and then coming up at 1 is our next session. Games and game-like experiences, and yeah, that'll start at 1. So thank you.
Thank you guys so much for having me, and it's like always a pleasure to see all the cool new stuff that you guys are thinking about. This has been really awesome, so I got just as much out of it. So thank you again for having me, guys. Really great work. You all should be very proud.
Yeah, really, I'm really impressed, everybody. Great job.
Yeah, congrats.
Cool.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks. Bye-bye.